Alright, third time's the charm, right? I've been recording these intro videos for Auth Log, and man, I get so long-winded. I'm going to try to keep this one under 20 minutes. That's just ridiculous. So Auth Log has a purpose of logging successful and unsuccessful attempts to authenticate to valid user accounts. It doesn't do anything for invalid usernames. Those are going to fail regardless. What it does is it logs valid authentication, invalid passwords, blocked users, and users who are not authorized to log in. Now that last option, I found it within one of the Joomla authentication plugins. I have not figured out how to trigger a not authorized error, but I'm detecting it the same way that the Joomla authentication plugin detects it. I can't figure out how to trigger it. So if anybody has any tips for how to do that, let me know. I'd like to test it. The Auth Log operates in the user profile edit in Administrator. Pardon me. It displays its output in the user profile edit in Administrator, and it optionally displays it in the user profile on the front end. So let's see what the back-end configuration looks like. Then we'll look at the back-end data display, and then we'll look at the front-end data display, and the options that are available for that are all found within the user Auth Log plugin. There are three configurations here. You have download ID. That is for people who have purchased the extension. They receive a download ID, and upon entering it into this field, it enables automatic updates through the Joomla updater. Visible to users, this defaults to off. When it is set, it defaults to no. When it is set to yes, a extra section appears within the user profile to display the successful and failed authentication attempts for that user, in case you're running an extension that makes the user profile visible to other users. The failed and successful authentications are only visible to the user who owns the account. So there's that. IP lookup. The front end display, the display of the data for the front end has an optional ability to run an AJAX query to a third-party IP address lookup service that can provide country and location information for that IP address. The reason that I did it in AJAX and not in PHP is that there is a 10,000 query per IP address, per requesting IP address limit for that IP lookup service, and pushing that off onto the end users pretty much eliminates the need to worry about that 10,000 request limit. No individual user is going to hit that any day. I seriously doubt it. I mean, 10,000 IP address lookups is kind of ridiculous. So let's take a look at what this looks like in the back end. So for an administrator, I'm gonna look up the super user first here, because he's the only one that's been logging into administrator. What happens is each time a login attempt occurs for a valid user, it's going to fall into one of four categories. It's going to be valid, bad password, disabled account, or not authorized. Like I said, I don't know how to trigger not authorized, but it's in there. So the items are color-coded. Items in red are bad passwords. Items in yellow, such as this one, are not authorized. Items in the clear or in this gray, it's a striped table. So items that are in the clear are normal, successful authentications, and the fourth type, the not authorized, they show up in blue, but like I said, I can't trigger. The data that we store is the GMT timestamp for the attempt, the IP address that attempted. The type of login, site is front end, administrator is back end. If it's a mobile device, it's listed here, platform, browser, and version, as well as the link that they attempted to authenticate against. So if you've got a user, an attacker that's attempting to authenticate to a separate form, something, some new attack method, at least you're going to know where that attack is directed. Now this is the login URL, and the client is only visible in the back end. Let's take a look at what the IP address lookup feature looks like. So the system differentiates between valid public addresses and private, reserved, and loopback addresses. Anytime that you get an entry with a loopback address or private address or reserved address, then the extension is going to display this message. The selected address is part of a range that cannot be accurately identified. It is part of a range of private addresses that are not assigned to organizations that are commonly found in private networks, home networks, or is a loopback address. If you're not familiar with private, reserved, or loopback addresses, then I suggest you hop on to Wikipedia, learn what they mean. You're going to see ranges like the 192.168 range, 169.254 range, the 10.xxx range, 172.16 through 31 range, as well as anything that begins with 127. All of those are reserved addresses, and there are more. Those are just the ones I can rattle off the top of my head. There are a bunch of other ones. So if you see this message, that address is something that came from local. It's in your local network, or it's from your machine itself. It's the server logging itself if it's a 127, or if it's a 192, a 172, or begins with a 10, then it's something on your local network. So you can't do a lookup on those because those are ranges that are designed for the everyday Joe to have in his house, or the everyday enterprise to use within their private network. So we're going to skip down to the very bottom here, where I inserted a nifty 4.4.4.4 into my database, which is representative of a valid address that you might see on the internet. This particular one is owned by Google. It's one of their DNS servers. And if you click on it, after a moment, it will pop up any information available from the IP lookup service. And by any information available, I mean there are about 10 fields that they may return, and my plugin will display any field that they offer. If it comes back as unknown or blank, then I don't display it. So if you only get a couple of things, then a couple of things are all that's available. In this case, we're getting country code, country name, latitude, longitude. Some of them provide a weird thing called a metro code that I don't even know what it means, but I display it. If it's there, I display it. Also, the plugin caches these on each page load. So if somebody's going through the list and they click on the same one twice, we're not double asking the lookup service. At least not on each page load. So that's what it looks like for the admin in the back end. I'm going to go back to the plugin configuration because I'm going to use that again here in a moment. Back to home. If a user attempts to log in with a set of invalid credentials, there's no extra message displayed. I wrote this to be as efficient as possible. There is a competing extension in the JED that I didn't like the way that it operated, so I wrote my own. I thought it was pretty inefficient in that each time you authenticated to the system, it triggered a second authentication so that they could capture the success or failure message. And I thought that was terribly inefficient, so I tied into the regular plugin events, and I captured my data from the plugin events themselves versus re-authenticating just to get an error message. So This is super fast, super efficient. It should not impact your login speed in any way, in any detectable way. I'm sure that someone's going to be able to measure it, but I couldn't notice that it didn't change anything. And I'm hosting this. My test server is a Raspberry Pi. I want to make sure that any inefficiencies are glaringly obvious. So my test system is horribly underpowered, so that I can convince myself to write efficiently. So as you see, there's no error message displayed when a user fails to authenticate, to indicate that attempt has been logged. So password 12, I think. Yeah, I remembered my fake password. This is what it looks like to a user when the front end display, when the profile display is enabled. As you can see, it does not display the client or the link attempted, and the color coding is still present. Unlike the back end, the front end gives you a little legend here at the bottom to indicate what the colors mean. And it only gives a legend for colors that are visible within your data set. So these items in yellow were attempts made while this particular account was disabled. Attempts in red are bad passwords, and again the regular colored attempts were successful attempts. The optional IP lookup, if I turn it off, the users are still able to see the IP addresses, but they cease to be links. As well, the visible to users display option here removes that segment of the user profile entirely. So if you're doing this for support reasons and you don't want the users to see that, you just want to have the logging for your own support needs, then you can shut that off, and the users need not know that you're logging their valid and invalid logins. Something that you might consider with this plugin is I've left a few options out. Some of the things that my competitors are doing, I left them out because I feel like they're dangerous. One of the options that the competing plugin offers is a notification option, which it sounds good until you consider their implementation sends a notification for every failed login, and I see that as an opportunity to inflict denial of service, not against their server, but against their email. And if you'll bear with me for a moment, I'll describe how that works. So if someone was to identify that your server was running that competing plugin, and they initiated an attack not to break into your account, but to flood your email server, or to flood the email server of an account that they have. Maybe they set up an account with Google, and then they set up a script to just continuously fail to authenticate, and then all of a sudden your server is spamming Google, and you end up on a blacklist, and all of your Gmail users can no longer receive notifications from your website. I see that as a possibility for anybody running a plugin like this that notifies on every failure. So I'm open to suggestions on how that should operate, Actually, any other suggestion you have too. I mean, I'm like really open to modifying my extensions to make them better. This is a paid extension, so I'm really open to suggestions because you guys are paying for it. So that said, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it helps you out in your endeavors, and let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Thanks.